So before we come back to the actual application of APL in various fields, let's talk about actually learning APL. And for that, we have a panel of people. So I will stop sharing. And we should now have Asher, Finn, Isaac, Justin, Max, and Stefan here. Welcome to you all. And we have half an hour. And to the audience here, I will say, feel free to chime in. In your Zoom interface, you have a Q&A button. You can ask questions to any one of us or to all of us as a group. Here, there's the chat pane. Feel free to hang out and communicate and ask questions there as well. You can raise your hands and otherwise listen in, participate. Everything goes. So let's just go around briefly to everyone here, and let's hear a little bit about yourself, like a minute, and what you do right now. So let's start with Asher. Do you want to say something about yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm a university student at the University of Warwick in the UK, and I interned at Dialogue last summer. Had a really amazing time, and I got a lot done then. And since then, I've been doing some on and off work as well. Recently, I was working on some resources for learning combinatorics using APL. I found that really, really interesting. But I still got a lot to learn, and that's also part of why I'm here.
Cool. Finn?
Yes, so I studied mathematics, and after that, at my first job, I was first exposed to APL, and I started learning it. Now that's already almost 1.5 years ago, and these days I'm using APL on a daily basis. I work as an actuarial consultant, and I mostly work in the enhancement of existing APL applications.
Nice. Isaac, you want to say a few words?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Isaac. I'm a software engineer, mostly in my day job doing fairly standard enterprise stuff. But I came across APL in, I think, 2017 through a problem-solving competition called Advent of Code. And I was quite taken with it. So since 2019, I've been recording problem solving and educational resources for APL and other array languages on YouTube.
Max?
Hey, I'm Max, and I studied applied math in school. I started learning APL just over a year when I went to an APL meetup and met my current coworker, Richard Proctor. He's here in the attendees and started working with economic data with APL in BCA research.
Very nice. Yeah. And Stefan?
Hi, Stefan. I'm a computer scientist background. I worked for a very large multinational company for many years, and for fun, I used to try and sort of learn a language or two every year, and I got sort of hooked on APL also, a bit like Isaac, through Advent on Code, which used to be the thing we did every year. Usually when I learned a new language, I learned it enough to do Advent on Code, and then I sort of tend to forget about it, but APL kind of stuck, and I sort of got to know a few people of the chat rooms and people working for Dialogue, and they were very helpful. And now I work for Dialogue too. Yeah, I sort of wrote a little bit of an introduction that some of you may have come across to sort of the missing resource that I wish I'd had when I tried to learn it. So.
Ooh, that's good. That leads us then to a discussion of how did you learn APL? Right?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it goes back to this thing about it being unreadable, because that's I find it sort of, a little bit kind of offensive almost. That usually I find like when I look at a new programming language, I can usually read it or at least understand it. Just I couldn't understand anything, and so I found myself at this crossroads saying like, do I get irritated by this and say that there's something wrong with the language, or do I just sort of get stuck in and try and learn it and like a 5-year-old really, and so that's what I decided to do, and I started to just do very simple things like one thing at a time, and then asking a lot of questions, because I as I said, I find it difficult to find the materials that I couldn't really Google for anything particularly efficiently, because it's obviously a bit niche. But I find you guys like Adam and others that were very helpful, and obviously not for the first time introducing people to APL, and that sort of got me over the hump, I think, and then trying to work through a lot of problems. I found that the best way of learning is to really get your hands dirty and really start making mistakes and learning from those. And I think that because it's so concise and there's such a sort of quick turnaround as well, there's like instant feedback, and that's really enhanced the learning as well. I think like once you get over that first little hump, you sort of accelerating, and I find it fascinating actually that the thing that I expected to be difficult were actually not very difficult at all. Like people say, oh, I can't type these things and these weird symbols, but that takes it takes a couple of hours of practice to, okay, you're a bit slower but they got so. Every symbol conveys so much compared to other programming languages. Like actually, whilst you type slower, your sort of overall sort of information density is so much higher. Yeah, and I just got hooked on that. Yeah, I think it tickles that sort of learning thing, right? Like it's really fun to start out with, and I find like once you get over the first hump, and then you get better very quickly. And quite quick, and then obviously there's a plateau at some stage where it takes a bit more sort of concerted effort. But I think that's the expectation, right?
Cool. Okay, you opened up for a lot of different subjects. Before we go on to any of those, let's just give Justin a chance to introduce himself as well.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Justin. I'm a software engineer and ontologist for Grow Intelligence. I came across APL a couple years ago through Andrew Singel's work on the April APL compiler. I'd seen APL before, but it seemed a little daunting, and I knew Common Lisp at the time, so I thought April was a way to kind of get into APL through Common Lisp, and so that was kind of my on-ramp to learning APL. And since then, I've used APL to teach image processing to students. I did that for a couple of years. And nowadays, I mostly use APL as a productivity tool. I do a lot of work on the command line, and I found that the APL primitives are really nice building blocks as opposed to, the Unix primitives on the command line are great too. It's just that there's a lot of them. And if you contrast that with the APL language bar, you can put together, string together some primitives and do a lot in a shell pipeline. And I find that I do that almost every day.
Cool. Okay, so using APL as a tool, a Swiss Army knife, so I've heard some people call it, and I can kind of resonate with that as well. That it's concise, allows you to fit on a line. Stefan mentioned a whole bunch of subjects of getting into APL and the hub. How has everyone's experience been with the learning curve of APL? Do you feel stuck, or was it easy enough?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, I can highly recommend Stefan's book, Learning APL. I certainly wish that I had this when I started, so make sure to check it out. Yeah, I think I first was taken with APL again, with this Adventum Code problem solving competition. A lot of these solutions to the problems go to 50, 100 lines in more traditional languages like Python. And there was this guy, Jay Fode, former CTO of Dialog, that was posting solutions where it was 1 or 2 lines. And I honestly was not sure if I was getting trolled or not, because I did not actually think it was possible. So you start looking into it. I think just starting with the Dialog documentation around the different primitives, the documentation is very good. And the primitives can be relatively self-contained, so you can, learn the symbols piece by piece and figure out what they're doing. If you have an established code base or a problem solution or something like that, once you understand the basics of the grammar, right to left evaluation, things like that, I think just looking through the documentation and looking at the different primitives, you can start to get to grips with how things work fairly quickly. At least this was my experience.
Cool. As I mentioned before, feel free to ask questions. We already have a couple of questions come in, which are on using APL in a more enterprise setting and using it in AI. But I think those are actually better questions for later discussion panels that we'll have today. So we'll leave them for now, and but just know that your questions are being seen. Right. So learning the grammar, but that's one of the things that I've often heard people say, "Oh, this is really confusing," or even claiming it makes no sense.
Yeah, I think it's confusing because it's different than most normal sort of programming languages that you encounter in a professional context or at university, etc. Once you understand it, I think it's quite simple, and I think that this is sort of the case for a lot of things with APL. I've had I've introduced several many people to the language, and I've sort of seen how they sort of think about it over time. So at first they kind of think of the symbols and the grammar as basically being kind of like an efficient encoding of traditional sort of programming language ideas. So like for loops, destructive assignment, things like this. But then the more time that they spend with it, they see how things are more internally consistent. They see how, you don't necessarily have to do like an explicit for each on everything, because you're already implicitly working with arrays and everything's being broadcast, things like that. So I don't. It's maybe initially confusing, but it's just because it's part of like a different paradigm, I think. And if you spend some time with it, I think you'll find that it actually makes sense in the context of what APL is designed to do.
So how about everybody else? Did you have like a moment where certain parts of the APL grammar, the way of thinking clicked? Or was it more like a gradual thing?
For me, it's oh, okay, you can go ahead.
Go ahead, Max.
Okay. For me, it's more of a gradual thing. For example, I've been struggling with the encode and decode the primitives, and I'm not exactly sure when to use which. But when that happens, I can just go on the web or within APL and type APL card, and I can just write the encode, spell it out, or write the encode glyph. Then it will tell me how to use it in the way I want. Most of the time, I was trying to format dates. So, for example, converting a date number into a date, just breaking the bar into year, day, year, month, day, and for that, there's already examples on APL card that's showing me how to do that. So by just looking, if I don't know how to do something, I just search it up in APL card, and gradually I have it already in my head, so I can just ask my head instead of an APL card.
I think for me the grammar and stuff like that you sort of pick up, you know. But I think for a long time I wrote really bad APL, and some say I still do. But it's the thing that took time for me was basically the sort of grammar bit aside, like learning to think in arrays and sort of this data-oriented problem solving. And I think that's the real treasure, really, of APL. And I think it transcends APL. It's a different way of thinking. And I think like because when I was learning, I was sort of writing Python and Go in my sort of day job, and actually once these sort of APL ideas started to sink in, it had an effect on code I wrote in other languages as well. You know, you start thinking about in sort of, you can do data-oriented, data-driven programming in other languages too, to a certain degree, and my code in those languages became sort of much more concise and efficient also, which was really nice to see. But that's the bit that when you focused on learning APL, it's easy to get stuck in the sort of mechanics of the language rather than the sort of essence of it, if you like, I think.
I would definitely agree with that. I think you just learning all of the primitives is more a gradual process, right? I mean, you start off with the basics, and then you discover more and more primitives and learn how to use them and all. But what is probably the harder part about learning APL is, I think, what Stefan already said, is learning how to approach problems with the array-oriented or finding an array-oriented approach to problems. And I think what really helps there is, for example, looking at the competition problems from the problem-solving competition, because they're designed in a way that there should be a nice array-oriented solution. So I guess that's a good place to practice.
And
So
for the problem-solving competition, Adám also has a collection of videos where he goes through the problems, the one-liner solutions, and in those videos, Adám really shows how to approach a problem with the array mindset, and showing you how to build up the solutions from scratch. And for that, it helped me a lot in terms of thinking about the problem and actually writing the APL. Like how do I construct a solution piece by piece into a funny looking one-liner.
oh well, good to know that it was useful for somebody.
I'm curious to the rest of the panelists, what was your experience going from starting out learning the primitives, just working on these small noodly problems, to sort of graduating to larger programs? And how was that different to you to working on larger programs in other languages?
I think I think that the first big program I looked at, I found was Aaron's co-defense, and that nearly put me off for life. Obviously, I thought that, my God, I will never manage to attain that sort of level of mastery. But I think that's a bit of an outlier, and I think one thing that became obvious after a while was that real APL, for want of a better word. So people write APL for a living in a enterprise. They don't write APL in the style of what you see in Applecart or in CodeDefense. It looks very different. It looks more traditional, if you like, and actually it's easy to get hooked on the clever stuff, right? The tacit and the ultra concise, ultra golfed stuff, but that's not the only side of APL. I think it's important to stress. You can write APL in a very different way too.
Yeah, so this touches a bit on a question we have from an attendee. on our backgrounds, whether we come from traditional programming language backgrounds, non-array programming. I personally started programming with APL as a child and have only approached other programming languages later. But is it true for everybody else that they started doing programming with non-array languages?
Certainly for me.
Okay.
For me as well.
Yeah, me as well. I think it does help if you have some sort of maybe like functional programming background. So I don't know, Haskell or a Lisp or something like that. Because there are some of the primitives, reduce, each have sort of analogs in terms of mapping and reducing and filtering and all this stuff. A lot of that can be expressed very cleanly in APL. And so you may have an easier time if you have that type of background and you're able to sort of see how these concepts map easier.
Right. Okay, and that we have a comment in chat as well that APL has informed programming languages. There's been influences. APL is a very old programming languages, relatively speaking, to other languages that are commonly in use today, and it's true that there have been some influences, but the APL was very early on with many of these things as well. So you can and you always could do very functional programming. You could also do procedural programming, and I mentioned APL being an array-oriented programming language, but it's more than that. You can do many different paradigms in APL. Modern APLs allow you to do even object orientation and definitely structured programming as well. But was it difficult then to switch because of the mindset, or was it just something that there seems to be some general agreement that it's a gradual process of getting to the APL thinking. But was it then a hindrance to you that you'd already gotten into the mindset from other programming languages? You said you could help with the functional programming, but it's not enough.
Yeah, I think so I think if you come from especially standard imperative languages, as you say, Adam, APL is flexible enough where you can, especially if you're leaning into like the traditional function syntax, you can replicate a lot of the more sort of standard imperative concepts that you might be used to, for loops, etc. So APL can kind of meet you where you are in terms of how much time you have to learn it, or how open you are to learning new concepts. As I was saying earlier, I think once you have the grammar down and sort of the gradual process of picking up the different primitives, I think the documentation is good enough and there are enough resources where this is I don't think that much is a problem. But what Stefan mentioned about sort of graduating from the primitives individually into changing your entire problem-solving methodology so that you're using a more array-oriented approach, this takes a lot of time and practice. And it could be argued that it takes more, especially if you're used to solving these problems in different languages where you're using more imperative or functional constructs. Someone, I forget who, someone smarter than me, but there's a quote where if you get your data in the right representation, then the problem itself is trivial. And as you learn more and more APL and you start encoding things in matrices and like higher order arrays, you learn. It sounds a little bit weird to say if you're not familiar with it, but you really do learn an entirely new way of thinking about and solving problems. And if you really want to go on from that, there's this whole kind of untapped literature about like linear algebra, solving like graph theory problems, stuff like this. So it's a very deep rabbit hole. But yeah, APL is kind of flexible enough to meet you where you are, and you can go as deep as you want.
Okay. We had some suggestions from the audience as well, and to additional learning materials. So obviously there's now Stefan's book, which is good for those coming from a programming and experience. We have somebody suggesting a relatively old tutorial, and but still quite relevant. And there are a lot, and a lot of learning materials. Anybody wants to point out what they used of learning? We had Apple Card and we had my APL Quest video series. Any others that you want to take up that were useful for you?
I used Adam.
Yeah, hi.
Same.
Yeah, I looked at a lot at Mastering Dialog APL, which does not cover a few of the newer features, I guess, but there Stefan's book is a great addition to that, I think. And I think it has good exercises and is very well written. So I think at least as an introduction, it's very nice still.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I mean, I guess I'm not going anywhere, so you can still ask me. There might be eventually some bandwidth problem if I try to answer everybody's questions at once. That's really why I created Apple Card as well, to answer those questions that had standard answers.
Yeah, I do want to point out that there are many and more every day it seems like, but there are a lot of community resources. So there's the APL Orchard, which I believe is still active, and Adam is there. You know, there's a dedicated Discord. I think, I mean, documentation and tutorials and everything is fine, but I think APL really sort of benefits from kind of one-on-one conversations with someone who's more experienced and can sort of point you in the right direction. Just know that those resources exist, and I personally at least encourage you to make use of them.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that Finn, you're sort of a professional APLer. Did you have at work, did you have like some mentoring resources available to you, or how did you get up to speed? Was it just thrown in at the deep end and told to sink and swim? Or...
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we had some older workshop materials, but they didn't really work for me, so I mostly stuck with the Mastering Dialog APL and went through that. And after that, I just people just gave me small tasks and helped me a bit with solving them, and then I just gradually worked from there. So yeah, nothing too special, I guess.
Okay. We have also requests for I guess Justin's APL code. Justin, do you still have that image processing code?
I do, yeah. Whenever I presented it to the students, it was like a 4-day. We met for a couple hours, and we went through I put together a Jupyter notebook. It was evaluating April. We were using April, but it was very simplistic APL. I can share the code. I haven't used it in a while. I guess maybe a thing to note is it's definitely the students were 6th grade to 12th grade, so it's a little more simplistic. But I will say, kind of speaking about picking up the language, a lot of them didn't have any kind of programming background, and I was surprised that like there was very little objection to any topic. That there was no resistance to operating on the whole array at a time. Nobody thought, oh, let's do this in a loop. It was kind of interesting, and really the students picked it up quite fast. Like they were doing things that I didn't expect them to do. So in some sense, we kind of ran through the material, but like I didn't have enough prepared because we got through it quite quick. So that was nice to know. But yeah, I'll put a link to the code in the chat.
And then if you could write a book based on that, that would be awesome, right? Okay, that's actually half an hour on learning APL, and there's a whole lot more we could discuss about this. And we're going to take a break. You can feel free to keep discussion going in the chat.